We're going to discuss his book, but first thing I want to jump into, first I want to welcome you to the show. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, thank you very much. I wasn't sure if you're talking to your listeners or me, but thank you.
To you, yeah. So, but to everyone else, first thing I want to dive into is you just had these big tech hearings in Washington, and I loved one of the angles you went in on them. We had the CEO of Google, CEO of Facebook, and you had the CEO of Apple there. And you asked all of them to commit to not using forced labor. This is something that the public too often gets ignored in what they're concerned about. And the public concern about forced labor producing products that we all use is actually, that concern is really high. And you never hear elected leaders talk about it. So I was so happy to see you hold their feet to the fire and demand an answer on if they will allow forced labor. And you got all of them to say they would not. Which is now something that will make it easier for people to hold them accountable when we do find evidence that they're using forced labor. So thank you for asking that question. And I would ask you if you could please just tell our viewers more about why you asked that question.
Sure. Well, the Chinese Communist Party uses forced labor. They use slave labor. They have imprisoned a minority Muslim population in China, the Uyghurs, and they are in slave labor camps, and they are being abused and really systematically eliminated as a population in China. And it's a horrible thought, and it's really when I go and I see a product made in the USA and a product made in China, I'm willing to pay more for that product made in the USA because I know the kinds of conditions that so many people have to work under in China. And I have to tell you, when I asked the question to the chairman or the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, and I think I also asked it to the chairman or the CEO of Google. They sort of hedged, and they said, "Well, we'll have our staffs talk to you and work with you." And I said, "Look, my staff doesn't even want to work with me half the time, so I'm not interested in having staffs have this conversation. I'm really interested in making sure that you answer my question with a yes. You will not allow any product on your platform that has been made with slave labor." And finally, I did get that from all four of the CEOs.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome. Another thing I wanted to get into with you was, censorship, because even this last week, Don Jr. and I both were suspended for a day from Twitter. In my case, I was suspended because I posted a Fox News article. Literally all my tweet said was a Yale epidemiologist who is a professor and a doctor is now touting hydroxychloroquine. That's all I said. I didn't make a claim of efficacy. I didn't say anything else. I was just saying this is an interesting development. This is somebody with a lot of credibility that is well known in the medical community. That's all I said. Same thing, Don Jr., he didn't say anything outlandish, made no claims about efficacy or anything like that. We were both suspended for a day. It's hard to look at that as anything more or anything less than election meddling when we had this large conversation about a very small number of Facebook ads that, foreign entities were pushing in the 2016 election. So it's hard to see what they're doing now, silencing conservative voices that are influencers, as anything but election meddling. How do you feel about that, and how do we stop it? Because I feel like this is one of those issues our viewers and Republicans in general are really passionate about. How do we actually stop this censorship?
So I have to tell you, one of the values that I think Americans share, and has really been a critical value in our history, is that we believe that the answer to bad speech is more speech, not censoring bad speech. If you disagree with somebody, you don't shout them down. You don't prohibit them from speaking on a college campus. You don't threaten them with violence or try to negate the content of their speech by attacking them personally. You offer the other point of view, and then Americans have 2 points of view, 10 points of view, different facts, different analysis that Americans can consider when reaching their conclusion. And that's really what makes us great as a country. Very few countries in the world enjoy that kind of open speech. And now we see the left trying to shut that down and using these very powerful positions with their tech platforms to try to shut that down. I think Americans bristle at the idea that we are going to have some sort of censorship or someone tell us what to think. And as a result, I really believe that there will be a backlash in this election to the kind of meddling that is going on right now.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, what I would ask you is what options are there left from a legislative standpoint or from, any sort of government entity, whether it be the FCC or whoever, that can do something to force these tech platforms to act fairly? I don't know if that's something in your wheelhouse that you agree with us on, but I feel like something has to be done because like you said, this is a unifying amazing part of America is that we're able to have these conversations. And when you stop that, it becomes so reminiscent of what my family fled Cuba. They fled that type of dictatorial behavior, and whether it's coming from a tech company or a government, the reality is these companies have more power, both politically and otherwise, than most countries do. So when you amass that kind of power, you have a special responsibility, especially when you're an American company, to uphold American values. And so that's my question to you is what can actionably be done?
Well, you make a great point. These companies not only have more power than many countries, they also have more revenue than many countries in the world. And I think what we all can do is we need to make choices about who we do business with, and we need to make those choices in a smart way that looks beyond just the dollars and cents, but looks to the long-term implications of how businesses conduct themselves. I also think it was really heartening to see that the Democrats were concerned about the accumulation of power among a few companies in this country, just as Republicans were, sometimes for different reasons. But I really think that action will be taken. We can do things. We can pass legislation that will have an impact on privacy. In other words, when you go online and you search for a particular kind of shoe or golf club or whatever it is you're looking for, every time you do that, there should be a little window that you have to click and say, I give up my privacy and this company can sell this information to somebody. And if you don't click that, they can't sell it. That's the kind of law that Congress can pass. Now, I have to tell you, as a conservative, as a libertarian, I'm very wary of using government power in the marketplace. But for some things that are so fundamental as privacy, for some concepts that are so fundamental, I think it is worthwhile that we take a look at those laws.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I think that's part of the informed consent process because the average person doesn't really understand what they're opting in for and isn't going to read the, litigious fine print,
the 200 pages
of what they're really up against.
Yeah.
So I think that having that transparency will really help. I want to talk about your book, Capital of Freedom, which we've had guests where I have not been able to read the whole book, and I started your book, and I ended up staying up pretty late because I was just very engaged, and I love the way that you've explained history and government in such a tangible way which I think the young people would really appreciate. So I would recommend this book to any parent that might have a college-aged kid who has missed the opportunity in our education system to really understand why it's important to teach these American values. So I wanted to ask you, Congressman, how do you feel our education system has done in regards to representing these values and teaching history, government accurately in the Constitution? It seems like there's just a gloss over it and an effective Marxist agenda. Would you agree?
Well, I think it depends. It depends where you are. There are certain large cities that have adopted this curriculum with the 1619 Project and other really socialist policies that have been embedded into the curriculum. And then there are, in my district, many rural school districts that teach American history and American values. And I think it's so important that we understand as a people. First of all, I believe there's only been one a flawless person that has existed on this earth. Other than Jesus Christ, we have people who are in power, who are leaders, who have been flawed. Some of them in our founding days owned slaves. But they did something so fundamentally wonderful and revolutionary when they changed the relationship between the people and government. And we have a government that answers to the people. And that wasn't something that was seen in Europe or any other country in the world at the time. And to not celebrate the greatness that we have, to only look at the flaws of certain individuals is a huge mistake. If we can't move forward in the way that we want to move forward and become an even better country, if we don't learn from history, we have to know our history before we learn from it.
Yep.
Right.
I want to give, I'll let you take the next question on the book because you know it so deeply. But I do want to warn legislators out there. This is something that was a shock to us as parents, and I think will be a shock to many legislators and really anybody who's in a position to do something about this. When we moved from California to Tennessee, so my background, I'm a Hollywood director. I've directed Oscar-winning actors, actresses, some of the biggest music stars in the world. We left there for family values in Tennessee. We live in a county that voted almost 70% for Trump, okay? Even at school here, my kids' Spanish class, they had a poster of Che Guevara on the wall. The teacher wanted to use the term Latinx. As a Latino myself, my family coming from Cuba, obviously I dealt with these issues, and I made it very clear to the school that having a poster of Che Guevara was a lot like having a poster of Hitler in a classroom for people like my family. And that it has no place in a school, and found out that this was not a history thing. This was the teacher was a fan of Che, and that's why it was up, along with a sticker directing kids to a website where they could be social justice warriors and boycott or protest against Congress members that are Republican. This is in a school classroom. Okay. And that's only one case of many. We had a history teacher also teach the kids that Jewish people were not in Israel first. And that was another, they said, oh, there's questions of whether Israel really belongs to Jewish people or not. This was in a history class in a district that voted 70% for Trump almost. So this is going beyond the big cities. And these curriculums are reaching those places where we would have never thought they would reach. And the reality is that the left is just so solidly taken hold of academia that the right really needs to do whatever we can to get back into schools and demand at least a politically neutral education for our children, and that they're given, a real fact-driven look at history in the way that you presented it in this book.
And there's a question. I know there is.
Yeah, so you jump in on the.
I guess with that, I would say, what they're trying to do effectively, it's like you mentioned in your book, the Alinsky tactics. They're trying to polarize and discredit our entire system, and they're baking that into academics. So while they might say they teach American history, and they very well might teach what the Constitution entails, right after it, they bake in their own political activism, discrediting what it is. So as a parent, other than just saying, let's just pull our kids all out from school, what can we do to effectively advocate for our own families to ensure that our children are being properly educated and are not going to turn into future SJWs for leftism?
Future Marxists.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's so important is that parents do more than just put their kid on a school bus in the morning and greet their kid in the afternoon when the child gets off the school bus. I think parents need to get into the classroom. They need to observe. They need to observe the school. They need to go to parent-teacher conferences. They need to talk to other parents. And once they do, they'll realize that perhaps their school doesn't have the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning. Perhaps their school is teaching a curriculum that is deeply offensive. And in learning that, they then have the tools necessary to run for school board, or to support somebody that's running for school board, or to be involved in the next search for the superintendent of schools in that district. But if they don't get involved, then what they end up with is a child at 18 or 19 that doesn't understand the fundamentals of American history. I also think it's so important that at the kitchen table at night, we teach our children history. We talk to our children about values. And I think that education, formal education, is a small part of the overall education process. It is so important for parents, whether you're homeschooling exclusively or whether you are just supplementing a school's education process. It's so necessary to be involved.
Absolutely. I agree with that. I think that also we have a right to demand, for our tax dollars, a better education, at least politically neutral So I think we have to organize as conservatives to really enforce that standard is being represented in our schools. So I want to talk about, you really broke it down in this book, and I think you cited an author that you liked. You could maybe remember it better than I could. But he was talking about how violence, is basically the next step, that they're inciting it with words, with this divisiveness, and that inevitably is the next step. And we've already seen that at the beginning with Maxine Waters and all of these women in Congress, essentially calling for the discrimination,
physically.
the discrimination of conservatives. So it's just a systematic desensitization towards this inevitable violent violence that they want to inflict upon conservatives. Could you speak more about that and break that down for us?
Sure. So I want to back up just a second. The book Capital of Freedom is about the tours that I give of the Capitol in the evening and the historical features that are present in the U.S. Capitol, whether it's a story that occurred there or whether it is a statue or some other symbol that's in the Capitol. And then I talk about why that constitutional principle is so important in America. And then finally, where the left is taking it. And where the left is taking us so often now is it's not good enough to disagree with conservatives. Now you have to make sure that you silence conservatives, and you silence conservatives with the threat of violence or attacking them personally. And it's an Alinsky tactic that has been created years ago. Actually, two students of Alinsky, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, learned the tactic very well, and the left employs those tactics very well. As long as we recognize those tactics, we can then combat them. And I don't mean combat them by using violence ourselves. I mean combat them by understanding that their sole purpose is to attack the credibility of Donald Trump, of Michael Pence, of the other leaders that we have in this country. And we should look beyond those attacks to really the substance of what's being said.
Yeah, I think that's important when we're talking about big tech as well, because it seems like the left just seems to get away with all of this. I mean, there's been families, their businesses have been destroyed by just being doxxed or being ostracized for their affiliation, for being a Trump supporter. I know we've had our own experience with that, leaving California, leaving the entertainment industry. So what kind of legislative efforts are you supporting right now to rectify that for conservatives?
So I think the best thing we can do is we can't legislate like the left is trying to and try to censor speech. I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that we speak out. And one of the ways I'm speaking out is trying to write a book and expose what the tactic of the left is, so that people understand this cancer culture. They understand that this Black Lives Matter movement is being funded by radical socialists. And it's not just about ending racism. It goes far beyond just ending racism and really gets into the core of American values and trying to destroy our history and our acknowledgement of how important our history is.
Right.
Absolutely. I want to back up a little bit too to what you said about parents not just letting their kids off the bus every day and then welcoming them back home and getting into the classroom. That extends to social media. Since we talked, social media seems to weave through all of this, because I think it's something that's kind of in the fabric of our politics and this generation, especially our kids' generation. We have 3 kids, and I can tell you with our oldest daughter, she's only 11. And I can tell you, even years ago, her friends at school already had phones, already had Instagram, already had TikTok. And it's so prevalent now. It's amazing that our kid doesn't use it, but it's because we don't allow use of TikTok. And I would say that that's a big thing for parents, is know what your kids are doing online.
Or any social media.
Yeah, or any social media. Know what your kids are doing online. And I think that I really appreciate that you guys are going after TikTok on the level you are, because China is not just benefiting from spying on our kids, but beyond that, this is something that has set our next generation back in terms of just intellect and innovation. Because although there's a lot of creativity that goes on TikTok, there's a lot of things that are just pure innovative genius that don't happen because kids are addicted to these things. And that's not something we can legislate away. That's something that parents need to be involved in, but I do appreciate from the Chinese perspective in terms of spying that the administration and people like you are standing up against TikTok. So I would ask you about TikTok. What do you think about what's being reported now that Microsoft is negotiating to buy the US arm of TikTok?
Well, I think you make a great point. It's not just Chinese espionage. It's also the fact that our young people, I have to tell you, I worry about childhood obesity. I worry about kids that don't get out to play. I worry about kids that don't understand the beauty of nature and the competitiveness of athletics. And so I think anytime that young people are spending time, too much time. Obviously, some of it is worthwhile and it's great social interaction, but too much time on video games or apps like TikTok, it takes away from their knowledge of the world around them. If Microsoft wants to buy TikTok, fine. I still think it's up to parents. I don't get a phone when I'm 11, 12, 13 years old unless my parents buy that phone for me. And I don't have a phone plan unless my parents pay for that phone plan every month. And I think it's so important for parents to get engaged and make sure that those tools are being used in an appropriate way and in an appropriate amount of a time each day.
Yep, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask you, so I wanted to press in a little bit on this. Just I'm really curious to understand the mindset around this because, as conservative, leaning, our inclination is not to go straight to legislate away our problems. We want to solve them, from the inside out. But at what point do you think when the debate doors are closed and people are no longer willing to debate us and no longer willing to, civilly
even
have
allow
discourse.
us to have a conversation with each other.
So when more Americans are silenced, is there a particular number of Americans that have to be silenced, or when do discrimination laws where are they really needed for a protected category? At what point would you say there is government intervention needed? I mean, would it be death? Would it be more violence? Or what is it really? When does it cross the line?
I'll give an example too. We had Vernon Jones on. I don't know if you know Vernon. He's a state senator in Georgia. He's actually an elected Democrat, but he put up a bill to protect Republicans from political violence because he's seen so many videos where people in MAGA hats or Trump shirts or whatever it is get attacked. And he's seen that then, people in his district reporting back to him that, hey, I'm actually being discriminated against at work and I was fired because I'm a Republican, and they just found out on my Facebook page that I'm a Republican and I post about, my local congressman or whatever it is. And that was grounds for them to be fired. So is there any thought to how we can do something to protect that from happening? Because we have all kinds of other protected categories in America. Is there a good argument against making it a protected category, or a better argument for making it a protected category?
So it is a protected category, and that's one of the things that I don't think people understand about the hate crime laws. It protects people based on race. It protects people based on creed. It protects people based on ethnicity and sexual orientation. It doesn't matter whether you are black or white. You are protected if someone's attacking you because of your race. And I think when you get into political speech, there are also civil rights protections for people that engage in political speech, and that those protections apply to conservatives and liberals. And so one of the great mistakes that we make is we believe that hate crimes are only created to protect African Americans or women or some other group. And the reality is that it protects African Americans and Caucasians and Hispanics and Asians. It protects women and men. And I think we have to make sure that we make our prosecutors and our public officials apply those laws equally.
Right. Yeah, that's where we're not seeing it happen. We're definitely not seeing it happen on that DA level or prosecutor level. We're not seeing them treat political violence like anything else. And I think that a lot of them, what I've seen is them actually make the excuse. They say, well, the legislation is not clear in terms of political violence being able to be charged a certain way or another. aside from just simple assault or whatever it is. And that's what we've seen all over the country with these Antifa assaults. If somebody's charged at all, they're charged with, whether it's simple assault or battery, whatever it is, but nothing having to do with something that would equate to a hate crime. Because that's essentially what it is. Whether it's, there was a black Republican that was stabbed in Portland recently, and we saw, there was political violence, obviously, during the huge outbreak of riots throughout the U.S. over George Floyd, where there was even death involved. So, in these cases, we're not seeing hate crimes being, added onto this in any form. So that's the one area I think maybe if you had something you would say to those DAs or prosecutors, what would it be to educate them on the fact that they could use, certain things that are already there in place to add charges?
Yeah, and I think the prosecutors and the police do know that. And I think that what's so important is that the American public understands that so that they can work with the prosecutors on issues like that. But I think it's absolutely horrifying that this country is moving so far left that violent speech or violent acts against someone with a different opinion. Remember, it wasn't too long ago where the left was attacking the right because we weren't tolerant. Well, who's intolerant now? Clearly, the left is intolerant about conservative speech and Christian values and homeschooling and school choice, and you name the subject. They are the intolerant ones that are attacking, physically attacking. We had a police demonstration in support of the police in Denver, Colorado. Antifa attacked and these were many of them 50, 60, 70-year-old Americans that just wanted to show the police support. Antifa attacked those Americans, and the police were ordered to withdraw from that situation. Some of them disobeyed that order to make sure that people didn't get seriously hurt. But that, why would you attack something? If you're tolerant, you're welcoming someone speaking up on an issue like that.
Right. I think that it brings up a really good point when you're talking about educating the American public. They need to also know that when you're living in these cities, like in Portland, where Andy No, journalist, was brutally assaulted, the police actually never, prosecuted him. They never.
Yeah, there was no follow up on his attacker,
and there won't be because of how the city's run, the leaders. So when you can't hold anyone accountable, you are taking a risk by remaining in these cities. I think Americans need to understand that they are putting their families at risk now by remaining in these cities, that are refusing to act, use the police to protect the American public.
Yeah, it's really, you go to the primary thing that we count on government for, it's safety.
Mm-hmm.
The government is expected to keep our country safe from foreign enemies and from domestic terror, And right now in these big cities, we're not seeing that happen.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be you're protected if you vote one way or another anywhere in America. And in conservative areas, that is the case. In fact, we just ran into a BLM rally the otother day here in Tennessee. And again, in a place where I said we have 70% of people voted for Trump. And the police were so kind, welcoming, and facilitating this group of kids. I say kids because they were all pretty much 18. And we ran into this by accident. We were actually on our way to get pizza. And we did something I haven't seen anybody do. We got out of our car. We were blocked in anyways. And we went and talked to these kids. And so many of them actually had really good hearts and were just very confused about the details. And when we talked to them about Marxism, and I told them stories about my family leaving Cuba and how, a lot of Cubans were sold the same story, a lot of the same divides on purpose. There were a lot of eyes and hearts opened. And I even had a woman there. She said after we were done talking and I explained everything to her and why you see resistance from Republicans on being supportive of the organization. At the end of it, she said, you know what? You're the first Republican I would ever vote for. And I told her, that's because I'm the first one you've talked to about this in depth. If you talk to our elected leaders, you talk to these people and you go in depth on the issues, you would see we all have the hearts that care about everybody. We're talking about the issues here and how movements like this are being used by people who want to use them as political vehicles to get their goals, to become reality. And that's what we're seeing Marxists do within a lot of these movements. They're gaining political power and insane amounts of money on the backs of really good-hearted people who maybe are confused why people like us are not just gung-ho out there rallying with them. And when I went through the statistics, I went through all these things with them. I mean, even these young people, their eyes were really open. So that's something I encourage people to do. But we even see that type of stuff here in Tennessee. So I would say, this is going on all over America, and it's something we definitely have to deal with, especially if we want to make a difference in this future generation voting Republican. So I just wanted to put that out there. I don't know if you've seen the same or similar things happen in Colorado.
I haven't, and I have to tell you, I'm one of those Americans that believes in protest. I'm one of those Americans that believes that as long as people are peaceful and they're making a point about some injustice in this country, absolutely in favor of it. Let's get more people engaged in the debate about what's good and bad for this country. And so I am so happy that when you got out of your car and you talked to people, they listened. They didn't immediately turn to violence. You had good conversations with them, and we need more people that have good hearts that are willing to communicate with others about their views. And so I think all too often these liberals get into a college campus and they just are living in an echo chamber where they keep hearing their voice repeated over and over again, and they believe that's the only reality. And what you're doing with this podcast and what you're doing with so many other efforts that you're making is great. It's what America's about. And hopefully you have an impact on those young people. Not that they shouldn't protest, but that they should be more inquisitive and they should find out more information.
Absolutely. I thank you for the kind words. One of the things we saw there was, I'd say one of the most effective things was I asked them about, actionable things. So if you believe that these things are the case, that there's all of these issues, and we went through all the issues, I said, I need you to make sense to me why you would support Joe Biden. Because if you look at these two people side by side, you have the Biden bill. I call the crime bill the Biden bill. He wrote the crime bill. You have him on one hand where, something he produced led to the incarceration of more young black men than anything else. And then on the other hand, you have President Trump and the Republican Party who have championed the First Step Act. They have led to the highest funding for HBCUs. The first time there's ever been an HBCU office in the White House. We had record employment for the Black community, for the Latino community, for the Asian American community, for women, for disabled people, all before this virus came along. Okay, so we had this story of an incredible united American comeback that was, you'd never seen an economy better than this in modern times, if ever. And so you need to make sense to me why you would vote for this over this, when this other person had decades to do what they say, to fix what they say is wrong with the system. And those young people could not answer that question. And they all ended up going back to this idea where they say, well, I didn't know Trump did all that. And so that's why I encourage Republicans, don't go and counter protest these kids. Go there and talk to them without being condescending, because we as Republicans know how difficult it is when we try to have these conversations with people on the left where they're condescending to us, or they assume there's no education. They assume you're a racist or a bigot or whatever it is. We can't do that to these kids. These are a lot of them, I'd say, 80% of these kids, good-hearted kids who are confused about the facts. And if you meet them there where they're at and you show that I understand why you're here and I actually appreciate that you have the heart to show up for something, I want to tell you why I'm here and meet you there, I think we can make a huge impact on this next generation.
Just to bring two of your points together, they weren't on TikTok. They were out protesting. They were out being what we celebrate in America, and that is free speech and the exchange of ideas. So absolutely, more power to them. Now, if they were really, really good, they would get Capital of Freedom. They would read that, and then they would really be educated and be Trump supporters.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things we've advocated with these kids is reading, Rand Paul has a great book about socialism, and I would love for every kid in America to read that and for every kid in America to read your book. These are books that are heavily digestible for kids. So for all the parents watching, we do have a lot of parents who watch our show. This is a great book for your young adults in your house. It really, really is. It's powerful. And we'll have a link on the YouTube page where you can click through and buy his book. I just can't say enough about how important the education is. And that was the thing that really was driven home to us when we ran into this protest by, I would say it has to be, divine, some sort of thing from God to make sure that we were there at the right time and this happened, because it really was, it taught me a lot of lessons about how we can connect with these kids.
Your pizza might have been a little colder, but it was worth it for America.
Yeah. We didn't even get the pizza.
We didn't end up getting the pizza.
We were all pretty hungry.
Yep.
Yeah, we ended up doing cold chicken nuggets instead.
Yeah.
Did you want to ask one more question about Colorado?
About Gardner, yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
Gardner's race, Senator Gardner there in Colorado, we have quite a few viewers who have reached out to us that they really want to get involved and they want to find a way they can help and are asking how they can do that, whether it is people, there's some who are stuck at home because they're immunocompromised, and then there's others who are willing to go out and do whatever it takes. So how can people help to keep Gardner as the senator of Colorado?
So if they go to cologop.org, that's the state party website, and we will connect them with the Gardner campaign or with the county parties where they can get involved. They can also just go online and look up Cory Gardner's campaign and volunteer. And I would really encourage them to do so. This is such an important election. We are going to be faced with some very critical issues in the next 2 years, the next 4 years. Who appoints our Supreme Court justices and what kind of United States Senate is going to confirm those nominations. That is essential. And Cory Gardner is a ray of sunshine in a very dark part of this country. Right now, we in Colorado need that ray of sunshine. And I really hope that people support him and make sure that we bring him across the finish line.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Congressman Buck.
Actually, I have one more question.
Okay.
I have one more question. There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about. And it was, if you had to explain, we want to do a little viral clip for people here. If you had to explain to young Americans, okay, so thinking 16 to 24, you had to explain to them in like 2 minutes or less why China is such a great threat to the United States and why we need to make sure that we're doing everything possible to counter the threat that they pose to us and to make sure that we maintain American exceptionalism and that we remain the power that we are, what would you tell them in those 2 minutes?
Well, I would tell them that China censors every piece of information the Chinese public gets. They do not have a free and open press, and they don't have a free and open internet. And the only companies that they allow to do business in China are companies that are willing to be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. I would tell them that they could see the effect in Hong Kong of young people that really yearned for freedom, and that freedom was taken away and beaten down in Hong Kong. They can see these minorities in China and the fact that they're imprisoned in slave labor camps. This isn't something that's made up in some way. This is a reality. And here in the United States, we welcome free speech and we welcome dissent, and because we get better from dissent. And the reason that we will always be a better country than China is because we have stronger values. And while we have to always look at the individual and the policies in this country, we need to also always remember to celebrate the great things about this country, the revolutionary ideas that have made us great, economically great and prosperous, as well as politically great and prosperous. And I don't care who the next president is, I'm going to do my very best to continue to make America great. I hope it's President Trump. He's a great president. I hope Senator Gardner is in the Senate to support President Trump. But we have to come together as Americans and stop this nonsense where we hate on each other because we have different views. It's absolutely wrong.
Couldn't agree more. We do need to find ways to unite and to win in November. Winning in November is so important to me because, having a family who fled Cuba and fled socialism and communists, who lied to people to gain power. I do fear if Democrats are able to take control of our House, our Senate, and the White House, that we may face a very dark next couple decades where, we're talking about legalizing millions and millions of new voters, 2 new states. And with those new states, Democrat senators for a very long time. And we would be looking at a power structure that made it very difficult for Republicans to win national races again in a way that would give us enough power to get things done. So I'm very concerned about this election, everybody doing their part and doing what they can. So I encourage everybody to go to the link that our Congressman Buck here has laid out for you. It was cologop.org, right?
That's correct.
And then also, if you could plug your book for us, easiest place for people to get it.
Sure. So barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, many of the large book publishers have it. And obviously bookstores will also have it in stock. If you have a bookstore near you, go. And I'm hoping that libraries have it in stock also, something that we need to make sure that we have conservative publications in our public libraries.
Absolutely. And that's another thing to tell parents. If you can, go to your libraries, look around, look at what books they have about Supreme Court justices, about presidents, about everything political. And if they don't have things representing the Republican side, not only, make the demand that it is in there, but, you can even make donations to these libraries so that they have these books. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you. It was great to be with you.
Thank you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Grow Up. We will be hopping on live stream in a little while, so we hope to see you there. And as always, click our link, subscribe, visit our website.
And buy the Congressman's book. It'll be on the YouTube bio, and you'll be able to click that link and follow through and buy the book. And let us know what you think about it, because I think it's one of those books that, we should try to disseminate as far and wide as we can. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Congressman, for joining us.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Look forward to doing it again.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.